Friends, I welcome you to my channel. Before listening to this story, I will ask you to like and subscribe. It is not difficult for you, but it is pleasant for me. And we're starting. It was only the 23rd anniversary, but I still hoped it would be something special. Unfortunately, the business conference, which took place at the last minute, ruined everything. I finished packing my things to spend the next 3 days in Baltimore and sat down for a snack before leaving. Marcy, I promise I'll fix this for you. Torrenson insisted that I attend this seminar. I looked through the agenda and didn't see anything particularly important, but he's the boss. Don't worry about it, John. I'll celebrate with you when we go to Europe for the 25th anniversary. We can go somewhere nice this weekend when you get back. Marcy and I have been married since college, and we have 2 daughters, Janet and Rachel, who are both in college. I started working at Beeman's International about 10 years ago and was doing well. I spent a lot of time at work, and I had to travel a lot. Marcy didn't seem to mind and found ways to occupy her time while I was away. Our marriage was strong and our life was wonderful. Apart from a busy work schedule, I assumed that everything was in order in my life. We talked from time to time, usually at office events, but sometimes with friends' neighbors. Both girls were quite independent and relied on us only for tuition and some expenses. Both of them worked while they lived on campus. After Marcy and I met, we started dating, and the transition to marriage was natural. There was no stormy romance, no episodes from the storybook. It was all business as usual and rather boring. While I was of average height, Marcy was quite pretty. I was a little over 190 centimeters tall and towered over Marcy, who was a good 15 centimeters shorter. She used to wear heels when we went outside to equalize our height. She had dark brown hair, which had just begun to show gray streaks. They gave her a sophisticated look. She jogged about 3 times a week to lose weight. Marcy was a beautiful woman, and any man would be proud of her. I'll call you when I'm settled in and give you the room number. We'll probably be busy most of the day and evening. They have some events scheduled for quite some time. I won't be calling tonight if this drags on. Don't worry, John. I have something to do. The girls brought some underwear over the weekend, and yesterday a new edition of the book club arrived. Don't worry about me. I'll see you Friday night. After a quick kiss, I went to Baltimore. It took 3 hours to drive, because I usually chose country roads. I hate interstates. The meeting started after lunch, so I had plenty of time to get comfortable. I called Marcy to let her know that I had arrived safely. What annoyed me the most was that nothing new was presented. I read the agenda before I came, but I still expected more. I couldn't understand why they sent me to a conference that was unnecessary. I was very annoyed after the last session in the afternoon when they announced that we were all going to a festive dinner at Ruth's Chris Steakhouse. Although there were 2 of them in Baltimore, they invited us to Philadelphia, where we had a corporate account. It was raining when we arrived in Philadelphia. They ordered 2 special tables for the group in a special meeting room. Given the prices they charge, I'm sure they didn't want a noisy company to annoy paying customers. After we all ordered, I excused myself and went to the men's room. The lighting in the restaurant was dim, but I could still make out my wife, Marcy, sitting at a secluded table with Bob Torrenson. She was dressed to the nines. It looks like she even got her hair done. She only goes to the beauty salon on special occasions, 2 or 3 times a year. Then I remembered that tonight was special because it was our wedding anniversary. When I was standing at the other end of the room, everything became much clearer. Now I understand why I made so many overnight business trips and seminars. I had no idea that Marcy was so close to Bob Torrenson, especially since he was married. We never talked to Bob and his wife, and I didn't even know when and how they were able to start a relationship. It didn't matter at the moment. It seems that our trip to Europe was never meant to take place. It was a good restaurant, and I didn't want to spoil anyone's meal, so I decided to behave with restraint. I went to the corner of the hall, where there was a corridor with a toilet. From there, I could see Marcy, as well as the conference room. I was sure Marcy would turn off her cell phone in such circumstances, but she didn't. "Hi, honey, it's John." I called home, but no one answered. Marcy was trying to answer her cell phone discreetly. This is difficult to do in a crowded, expensive catering establishment. "I'm sorry, John. I was downstairs in the basement and I didn't hear the phone ring. I thought you weren't going to call. What's happening?" Bob's face showed disgust as Marcy tried to keep her voice down. I just wanted to let you know that I'm on my way home. The conference ended early. I'll be home in about an hour. See you soon. What? Wait a minute, John. The washing machine is rattling. Marcy quickly covered the phone with her hand and spoke to Bob. From her expression and gestures, it was clear that the conversation was very urgent. Bob whipped out his phone and 2 seconds later pressed the speed dial button. Across the room, the conference director was answering calls on his cell phone. The conversation between Bob and the party room was very short. Marcy's face showed fear as Bob relayed what he had just heard. She slowly brought the phone to her mouth. John, where are you? What is it? She asked. I think you know the answer to this question. That black dress suits you. It goes well with the pearls I gave you last Christmas. You don't have to come home tonight. I'm moving out tomorrow. By the way, congratulations on your anniversary. John, wait, we need to talk. They always say that. This is probably the stupidest expression that women who are caught cheating can have, but they always say that. It was raining like hell when I left the restaurant. My car was in Baltimore, and I was stuck in Philadelphia. I walked towards the city center. In less than a minute, I was soaked through. For some reason, I didn't care. My phone rang several times, but I didn't pay attention to it. Eventually, I turned it off. I decided that it might be wiser to conserve the battery. I was worried about missing the free Ruth's Chris steak until I went to the cheesesteak store. I was depressed, but it was the best steak sandwich I've ever had. Probably the easiest thing would have been to rent a car and drive home, but I didn't really want to go home. The house was a cozy place, and all my things were there, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't convince myself that it was necessary to go there. It was only a few minutes' walk from the steak shop to the nearest bar. After drinking 6 servings, I was ready to go to bed. I woke up in a squalid little room, which, I'm sure, is usually rented on an hourly basis. The night before, my costume had completely deteriorated due to the bad weather. There was a bus stop 3 blocks away. I bought a razor and a tube of some shaving cream from a vending machine, and after a few minutes I looked more or less presentable. A pair of cotton trousers and a polo shirt cost me less than $20 at a store closer to town. The charity foundation bought my suit and a white shirt. By that time, the banks were already open. I don't live in Philadelphia, but most of the banks and other companies I deal with have offices or headquarters there. I quickly closed my checking and savings accounts. I even took money from the girls' college fund. The mortgage department at the bank was unhappy when I told them that I wanted to cancel the mortgage loan. They were confused by the fact that I had more than $60,000 of equity, and there was no need to return the house. They had to agree that it was a good deal for them and allowed me to sign the release documents. They also said that I should get my wife's signature. I smiled and told them it was their problem. I canceled my bank credit card after I paid the balance. I have accumulated a substantial amount of money on all life insurance policies. The company agreed to mail the checks to my sister in Savannah. Fidelity Mutual Funds have also agreed to mail checks to my closed account. My cell phone ran out of battery, but I was able to borrow a phone from a friendly secretary to call at work. The head of my department at work was unhappy with my departure. After his counteroffers aimed at keeping me failed, he politely demanded to know the reason why I was leaving so quickly. He didn't like that Bob Torrenson was sending me to nail my wife. I explained that it had already been done and there was nothing he could do about it. Before transferring me to the HR department, he promised that Torrenson would be dealt with. The staff was more than willing to mail my latest paychecks, profit sharing, sick leave, and accrued vacation pay to my sister. The helpful secretary also agreed to give me Bob Torrenson's home phone number. I made 2 more phone calls to cancel the payment on 2 additional credit cards. An hour later, I was on the bus to Baltimore. I decided to pick up my car and take the few things I had in my hotel room. It would take me a whole day to get from Baltimore to Savannah. My sister Grace and I were close. I decided to explain everything to her and also tell her that some checks would be coming to her house. I turned on my cell phone to charge it in the car. While it was charging, I received several calls, but I did not answer any of them. As soon as I get settled, they'll give me a new room. So many hours on the road give a person a lot of time to think. I was completely at a loss as to what prompted Marcy to contact Bob Torrenson. For the life of me, I couldn't figure out when it could have started and how. Was I somehow an active participant in what happened, or was I completely passive? It seems that in some ways I turned out to be a bad husband. After a few hours, I decided that I really didn't care. I no longer felt the need to blame or find fault. What's done is done, and it can't be changed. It's time to move on. I regretted that I did not have my birth certificate, passport, and car license with me. I could have done it or figured out how to get them. I had a laptop and a briefcase. I could have made do with a car charger for my mobile phone because I wouldn't use it often anyway. My health insurance was still valid for 90 days, but I didn't plan on getting sick. About an hour after I left Baltimore, I called Bob Torrenson's wife. It turned out that Bob was fired that morning for unspecified reasons. At least that's what he told his wife. She thanked me for explaining everything to her in more detail and promised further retribution, both for her and for me. I felt it was the least he deserved. I called Grace and told her I was coming. "Welcome, my wayward brother." Grace was sitting on the porch when I pulled up. "Your wife called twice, tried to find you, but did not say why it was so important or why you might be going to visit your sister. I suspect you're going to tell me everything now, or I'm going to have to kick your ass." There were 4 rocking chairs on the porch and a refrigerator, which I knew was supposed to hold beer. Grace was older than me and a little smarter, or should I say wiser. I plopped down next to her. "From the look on your face, I can only assume that you didn't expect this?" "I did not foresee this and never expected it. Your little brother is blind and needs comforting words." Grace handed me a cold bottle of beer with a pathetic smile. Rocking chairs were installed, just so that we could lean our feet on the porch railing and watch the passing traffic. Grace and her husband Carson bought an old brick 2-story house 20 years ago. Fortunately, Carson turned out to be very helpful because he had to replace half of the wood in the lower part of the building. Termites are a living hell in humid coastal areas. It paid off because it was now part of the Savannah Historic District. I guess it's infidelity. Am I right? Yes. And who is this scoundrel who is cheating? Marcy or John? Well, I'm too socially unsuitable to ever meet another woman, so it must have been her. Grace thought for a moment. I wasn't trying to be nice, but it was hard for me to admit that my wife had cheated on me. God, John, I didn't expect this. I never thought Marcy would be capable of something like this. How did all this happen? I don't know and I don't care. It turned out that she slept with my boss, and he started sending me out of town on business trips so they could be together. I was just lucky to find out about it. I had no idea. I haven't discussed any of this with her. I just left. Is there any chance that you're wrong? No. She lied to my face when it was happening. She was sitting with him in a restaurant, and she told me on the phone that she was at home doing laundry. I was 10 meters away from her, and I was watching her. There could be no mistake. Of course, I've never found them in bed or in a motel room, but I'm pretty sure it happened once. I suppose there will be no reconciliation? That's never going to happen. We drank the second bottle and were silent for 10 minutes. It was the first time I realized what had happened, and I didn't like it. Why don't you get yourself cleaned up for dinner? Carson will be home in a couple of minutes. You two can remember the good old days while I cook the shrimp. He doesn't know anything, so it's up to you to decide if you want to tell him. I won't say anything if you don't want me to do it. Just give him my regards. It's better not to keep something like this a secret. I stayed with Grace and Carson for 2 days. They had 2 sons, both married and independent. Carson gained a few pounds, so he had a lot of spare clothes that he could put on me. I needed her. Grace has agreed to hold on to the checks and any other mail that comes in until I get the forwarding address. I had no idea where I would end up. The next day, Marcy called once, but Grace said she hadn't seen me. I asked Grace to call the girls at the college after I left and explain the situation as best she could. It was important that they knew that tuition fees would be taken care of. I wasn't ready to meet the girls face to face. Before leaving town, I took a new cell phone number and bought 2 pairs of comfortable shoes. I hated the interstate, so I ended up turning onto Old 301, heading south. The nicest thing about the area was that you could have lunch at the Crystal and have breakfast at the Waffle Iron. What more could a man want? The first night I slept in the car, in the parking lot at Walmart, between 2 huge vans. In addition to lunch, one of the nice features of Crystal is free Wi-Fi. I didn't really have an urgent need to use the internet, but it was nice to know that it was available if I needed it. I was driving along the St. Johns River, somewhere in the Tint area, when everything changed for the better. It was the middle of the morning, and I stopped to refuel at a small gas station that served as both a pier and a restaurant. It was a remote place, located about 100 meters from the main road, but visible from the bridge crossing the river. The parking lot was strewn with gravel, and the dock, which had seen better days, looked like it had once been a marina. The restaurant was a two-story building, half standing on a pier, half on land. It hasn't been painted for at least 10 years. On the other side of the street were 3 mobile homes that were at least as old as the painting of the restaurant. The gas station, apparently, was built for boaters who happened to be on the water. The sign in front of the entrance read, Sadie's Fish House. I worked at Captain D all through high school, so I felt a twinge of nostalgia. I carefully went down to the river. The place needed repairs. 2 teenage boys were sitting on the dock and just looking at the water. Loud voices, male and female, came from the back of the restaurant. I got the impression that the guys were there to avoid what was going on inside. It looks like someone is doing a good job there. I was trying to be polite, but not intrusive. They both looked at me. The eldest of them broke into a smile. Charlie came to work drunk again. Mom wants to fire him, but he's the only cook she can hire. If he leaves, she'll have to close the place. She can't cook and wait tables at the same time. I suppose you guys are helping her. The restaurant sells beer, so according to state law, Josh and I can't work in the gym until we turn 18. We can help in the kitchen, but it doesn't help Mom much. Around this time, Charlie fell out of the kitchen through the back door. It was obvious from his unsuccessful attempts to get up that he was drunk. And don't even think about coming back, you bastard. This was my first contact with Loretta Fields, a Cajun girl who got lost in Florida. She stood in the kitchen doorway with fire in her eyes. Charlie was lucky she didn't have anything in her hands, because she would have thrown it at him for sure. Loretta was about 180 centimeters tall, and she was all muscle. The uniform she was wearing didn't suit her, and it was obvious that she wasn't dressed very well. I chided myself for being such a dumbass and tried to put that childish remark out of my mind. She had shoulder-length brown hair and sharp cheekbones that accentuated her dark brown eyes. The lack of makeup made her look even less feminine. She was a tough woman who definitely had a hard life. She stood with her hands on her hips as Charlie descended from the dock and crossed the parking lot. "What the hell are you looking at?" She seemed to be as mad at me as she was at Charlie. "My name is John Wilson. I was looking for a job." I don't know what made me say that. I wasn't looking for a job, but at that moment it seemed to me that it was the best thing to say. Something about the whole conversation caused the boys to burst out laughing. "Josh, Terry, get your asses inside and start getting ready for dinner. There's nothing funny about it, and I don't approve of your attitude." When the boys ran inside, the evil witch of the South turned her attention back to me. "My name is Loretta. Do you have any experience working in a restaurant?" "I worked in a restaurant for 2 years on cooking. I do not know everything, but I know how to navigate the kitchen." I can't explain why I persisted in playing this game, but I was fascinated by her passion. I was sure it would end quickly, but at that moment I was hypnotized. My first day working as a chef at Sadie's Catfish House was quite successful. I mixed up a few orders, but nothing serious. The guys helped me a lot by explaining the standard procedures and finding the necessary products. It was mainly the preparation of bread and roast meat. I was more familiar with fish cooked in batter, but it was almost the same there. The biggest problem for me was cleaning the fryers after lunch break. I don't think they were cleaned last year. They had an oil filter system installed, which was pretty easy to use, but it was still dirty. Loretta and I spent most of the day preparing for dinner. I quickly learned how to cook cabbage stew according to her recipe. She looked through the entire menu to see if I had any questions. It was mostly catfish. Although we didn't discuss anything, I got the feeling that she was assuming that I was a permanent employee. I was flattered and intrigued. I needed to kill time somehow, and it was fun. After the evening cleaning, Loretta treated me to a cold cocktail, and we sat down to talk. "In case I forget, I want to thank you for helping me out of my predicament today. I really appreciate you being here." "No problem. For $20 an hour, I'm ready to do anything." "Wow, don't drive the horses. Where the hell did the $20 figure come from?" "I'm just trying to figure out how grateful you really were." "Charlie gets $6 an hour. I don't need it. I can't afford to pay you what you want. I can increase it a little, but don't be greedy." "6 is fine, Mrs. Fields. My big problem is where to stay. The boys and I live in one of the trailers across the street. Mabel, the owner of this whole barack, lives in the big one. I'm renting a restaurant from her. Her son Clyde runs a gas station. He lives in the third trailer. There is a storage room upstairs, but there is no furniture or plumbing. You can use the toilet in the restaurant, and I'll let you take a shower in the trailer. And how much will these luxurious apartments cost me? How about free overtime? I pay you for a 40-hour work week and everything else you do beyond that, for free. Do you work every day? I close on Mondays. I'm at the beauty salon today. I decided that her humor matched her character. How could I not like this woman? The first night in the warehouse was hard. It was dusty, dirty, and the floor was hard. But still, I beat up Subaru pretty badly. The best part was that I had a fully equipped kitchen to cook my own breakfast. A week later, I was already well settled. I called Grace and gave her the address. She had to send half a dozen letters, which I hoped contained checks. On the first Monday, I went to the tent and opened a bank account and a safety deposit box. I finally got rid of all the cash I was carrying with me. I took the boys with me and bought some used furniture. They were happy to help, and I enjoyed their company. I was uncomfortable taking a shower in Loretta's trailer. I felt like I was imposing on her. With the help of a PVC pipe and a little time, I was able to build an outdoor shower behind the restaurant. It looked like a changing house, and it turned out pretty well as long as it wasn't too cold outside. The guys helped me with the shower and even tried it out first. Loretta's husband died on an offshore drilling rig 8 years ago. He stayed on the rig during the hurricane, and things didn't go well. She got some insurance from the deal and used it to open a restaurant. He and Mabel seemed to get along well. Josh and Terry spent a lot of time with me. I think they were looking for their father. My relationship with their mother remained strictly professional. There were a few moments when I thought about her a little differently, but I didn't want to risk ruining a good relationship. It's time to check on my daughters. Fortunately, they both studied at the University of Pennsylvania, so I only had to call once. I could tell by the sound of her voice that Rachel had answered the phone. "Hello, this is your dad. I just thought it was time to call you girls. Is Janet there too?" "Janet is in class. We were all wondering when you'd call." Mom is hysterical, but at the same time evasive. "Janet, and I think we need your version of what happened. What the hell is going on?" "I'm sorry about what happened, darling. First of all, how does your mother explain what is happening?" "She claims that she organized a romantic dinner for you two in honor of your wedding anniversary at the steakhouse. Your boss helped her organize everything. When you came to the restaurant, you saw them together and got scared. She didn't have a chance to explain to you what happened. She seemed to be very upset." "Wow, it's a great story, Rachel. Unfortunately, this is just a story. Your mom had no idea I was going to be at that restaurant. When I showed up, she was shocked and surprised. I called her at the restaurant before she knew I was there. She told me she was at home doing the laundry. When she discovered that I was watching her from across the room, she went berserk. It wasn't a surprise party. My boss and your mother arranged for me to be out of town so they could meet. I caught her, and she's trying to cover her ass. It makes more sense than her version. What do you want us to do? And why are you calling from Savannah?" "I'm not in Savannah. I just had a phone there. Don't be too hard on your mom, but try to get her to tell you the truth. That's all. What else should we do? If you're going home for Thanksgiving, go into the office and dig out my passport, birth certificate, and documents for Subaru. Mail them to your Aunt Grace. She can make sure I get them. Don't tell your mom, and for God's sake, don't give her my cell phone number. I don't want to change it again. I'm sorry about everything, Dad. Janet and I are always there if you need anything. Thanks. Oh, by the way, I have all the money for your tuition, so you don't have to worry." I felt better when I took care of all this, even though I didn't want to tell Rachel about her mother. I had no doubt that Rachel believed what I told her. Marcy's story was interesting, and I think that's the best thing she could have said under the circumstances, but she couldn't stand the criticism. I was dying to know more about this novel, but it wasn't worth the pain. Things were still going well at the Catfish House. I received the checks from Grace, as well as the documents that the girls sent. I'll be able to buy new car tokens in Florida when they run out. I transferred my salary from the restaurant to my bank account, but I kept all the rest of the money in a safe deposit box. The interest rates were so low that I didn't feel like I was losing anything, and the money was safer there. I've been eating at work all week, so on Mondays I was looking forward to going out and doing something else. It wasn't difficult for me to persuade the boys to come with me. Loretta naturally followed me. It was my treat, and although neither of us would admit it, it was kind of a date. The Chinese buffet cafe seemed to be my favorite, but they all loved sushi too. Sometimes we had to drive for quite a long time, but I didn't mind. Loretta visibly softened. From that first day on, I no longer noticed anger in her. Sometimes I thought I caught her looking at me when we were working, but she quickly looked away. I was still married, but Loretta was already starting to look good. The restaurant worked steadily, but earned hard to cover the costs. I lived practically on pennies. The money that Loretta paid me went to the bank. I had practically no living expenses. Every month I bought a full tank of gasoline and spent an evening with my family on Mondays. I have no idea why I started to see Josh, Terry, and Loretta as family. It just happened by itself. Mabel dined at Sadie's every day, free of charge, of course. It was noticeable that she was a little tired of the menu. I was just an employee, and the place belonged to Loretta, so I kept my mouth shut, but my eyes and ears were open. Most of our clientele were local guys who, I think, were more interested in beer than food. Just before Christmas, Janet called me. "Dad, how are you doing?" "I think it's all right. I have no complaints." "Is school starting again?" "Next month." "I just wanted to make sure you were going to be okay for the holidays." "I'm fine. I assume you and Rachel will be with Mom?" "Yes, but we are not looking forward to it. Especially now that we know the whole story. Do you want to fill me in?" "You won't like it, but you were right about the whole situation. Mom and Mr. Torrenson have been dating for over a year. In the end, she admitted that they had a full-fledged relationship. She didn't want a divorce, but she also didn't want to stop seeing him. She said she hoped to keep it the way it was because it was perfect for her. She started telling us something, and Rachel and I had to ask her to shut up. We didn't want to know the details. Rachel barely talks to her mom." "You're right. I didn't want to know. What is her current relationship with Torrenson?" "Oh, there aren't any. He was fired from his job, and he blamed her for everything. His wife filed for divorce, and he blamed his mother for that too. The last I heard, he moved to Chicago and didn't ask Mom to come with him. Mom got a job at an insurance company answering the phone. After you left, she ran out of money very quickly, and she couldn't even pay her utility bills. She's just starting to make ends meet now, but I think she's selling her jewelry and stuff. The bank told her that she would no longer need to pay for the house if she signed the appropriate permit. I think she'll try to sell it instead. I'll send you a power of attorney form to make it easier for your mother to sell the house. You can give it to her when you come home for Christmas. She'll probably appreciate it. She was wondering why you haven't filed for divorce yet. I'm not going to. When she's ready, she'll have to do it. I have no money, no job, and I live on what I took from the bank when I left. It's going to end very soon. I saw no reason to tell my daughters or my wife that I have a good stash in the Palatka Bank, where I am waiting for my release day. My wife has never shown any interest in our finances, and if she hadn't hired a really good lawyer, she would never have found out. I thought she'd go to the cheapest lawyer she could find. I'll let her know when we get there." "Janet, I'm sorry that I didn't give you girls anything for the holidays this year. I'll try to make it up to you, I promise. After the end of the school year, let us know where you are, and we can visit you on spring break. Then you can make amends." "Agreed. Have a nice Christmas." For the last month or so, I've been forced to take a shower at Loretta's. While I was there, she always found something else to do, so there was no way to break the rules of decency. It can be cold in North Florida, so I needed to use her services for a couple of months. I've reached the point where a little inappropriate behavior on her part would be appreciated. I wasn't courteous enough to arrange something like this. I was afraid that if I did something wrong, it would make her angry. Usually, when I took a shower, the boys were at school. After I didn't give my daughters anything for Christmas, I felt guilty when I bought new Game Boys for the boys and a turquoise necklace for Loretta. She always wore collarless blouses, and I couldn't help but imagine how good she would look with the right accessories. On Christmas Eve, we closed the Catfish house early and opened the presents. Loretta and the boys gave me a GPS navigator for Subaru. We ate boiled shrimp and whole crayfish. It was fun for a while, but the boys wanted to play with their new toys. Loretta told them to go home and not wait for her. Terry winked and gave me a thumbs up as they left. It looked like it was going to be a good holiday. Loretta and I talked for about an hour. We avoided any mention of previous spouses. Even though I was still married, Loretta didn't seem to mind. Because I was very slow to assimilate the information, she eventually took my hand and led me upstairs. We both had months of pent-up frustration that was about to burst out. It was a competition to see which of us would take off our clothes first. Loretta had the body of a weightlifter. She had well-defined abs, like the girls in the Bowflex commercial. Instead of soft breasts, she had wonderful elastic balls. Even after the birth of 2 children, she didn't have a hint of posture. My admiration for the lack of jewelry on my chest was unfounded. She was really beautiful. I had no idea what to do with my hands while this was happening. She was lying face down on her back when I started kissing every inch of her body. I didn't want to miss a single spot. I moved lower and lower until I reached a thick, dark bush. I thought that all girls shave there these days, and I was pleasantly surprised to find out that Loretta is not like most girls. She spread her legs and let me come closer. Before I knew it, she had her arms wrapped around me on both sides of my head in a death grip. Now I knew that I had to finish what I had started. I have not been able to come to any conclusion. I guess it was only once, but I really couldn't say for sure. My face and her pubic hair were covered with sticky, sweet moisture. She was sweating profusely, despite the cold in the room. Loretta never let go of my head. She lifted me up as if I were a rag doll, and our lips met again. Our sweaty bodies lay side by side, not noticing that the room was not so hot. I leaned over her and covered us with a light blanket. Loretta purred softly in appreciation. It was very fast, and I got a long-awaited pleasure. I expected her to sit on me as soon as I strained, but she had other plans. She kept shaking her head up and down until I couldn't take it anymore. With each movement, she sank deeper and deeper until her lips were buried in my pubis. I was doubtful about what actions should be taken during the eruption. Remembering how she behaved last night, I put my hands on her head and gently pressed, blowing my seed into her warm mouth. She coughed softly and then swallowed quickly. We cuddled under the covers for a few minutes, and then she raised her head and said, "Merry Christmas, John Wilson." Hearing the boys' footsteps downstairs, Loretta jumped out of bed and began to dress. When I came down, the boys were already having breakfast. Terry smiled broadly at me and gave me another thumbs up. I don't think Josh understood what was going on. I ate with the boys while their mom went home to take a shower. At that time, I had a terrible thought about contraceptives. She usually didn't stay the night, but sometimes it was nice. I think Terry explained to Josh how things were going in life shortly after the holidays. Both boys didn't seem to mind the arrangement. Grace forwarded the divorce papers at the beginning of the school year. Marcy attached a small note thanking me for the power of attorney and informing me that she had a proposal for the house. The divorce was simple and to the point. I was in charge of the girls' school, and that was the end of it. I signed it and sent it back to Marcy's lawyer. I realized that I had given away my secret location, but I didn't care anymore. Loretta asked me if I had any ideas about the restaurant menu. She more or less gave me complete freedom to change whatever I wanted. I hesitated to ask her if I could do it, but I appreciated her trust in me when she suggested it. The seafood wholesaler was more than happy to add several packages of frozen whitefish portions to our weekly catfish supply. Terry was thrilled that he had learned how to cook fish and chips. Of course, it was just the American version of the British main course. Loretta and I managed everything during the school year. The business was developing slowly but steadily, so we could handle it without problems. None of us expected the consequences of expanding the business. On weekends, I made the boys cook. My demands weren't too high, so I was quite happy with what they were doing. The whole place belonged to Loretta, but I got the feeling that she wanted me to take over most of the work. At first, I was just suggesting something, but over time, she seemed to feel relieved that I was just making decisions on my own. She never criticized or complained about what I was doing. I've never been interested in doing this kind of business, but it seems like it was becoming my destiny. I'm sorry if this sounds a bit profound. Clyde caught my fever and even repainted the gas station. After a quick call to his distributor, he purchased shiny new signage and even some new pumps, which required credit cards. After he put everything in order, The seller persuaded him to install several racks for the sale of all kinds of tourist goods. It was free for Clyde, and he got his share of everything that was sold. This gave the place a less low-class look. Terry turned 16 and got permission to study. I had a lot of fun teaching him how to drive an SUV. I think Loretta was glad she didn't have to do it. In 2 years, it will be Josh's turn. One day, a nice guy from the vicinity of Moss Bluff brought a refrigerator full of meat from alligator tails in a truck. He spent 30 minutes trying to convince me of the nutritional benefits of eating reptiles. He knew a lot about the subject, but he was a lousy salesman. I tried to pretend that I was interested so as not to offend him. He also had some frozen turtle in his truck. I got the impression that he didn't think things were going too well when he made a smart move. I will leave you 5 kilograms of alligator tails and 5 kilograms of turtle so that you can try them for free. I'll be back in a week to see how things are going. Do you mind, mister? He took me by surprise. Then I showed some audacity, and he hit me. Of course, I would be glad to try. Do you have any suggestions for cooking? Most people just like to chop, pan, and fry. If I decide that I like it, how much will it cost me? He got into the truck and handed me a green piece of paper with prices, phone numbers, and government permit numbers for the sale of alligator and sea turtle meat. Depending on what portions I serve, it would be possible to make good money on what he had if I could sell it. Thank you, Mr. Collette. I would be glad to try it. I'll see you in a week. His name, phone number, and address were listed at the top of the sheet. We liked the fish and chips part of the menu. At first, we only ate it for dinner when Terry was free, but we ended up eating it all day. The alligator and turtle ran out before the end of the week, and I had to call Tom Collette to order more. The most popular dish turned out to be a combined dish of alligator, turtle, and catfish. Things were moving faster than we expected. Loretta and I used to wash the dishes after eating. We had enough dishes to provide normal customer service. With the increase in the number of customers, we are faced with the fact that we do not have enough clean dishes. That's when we hired Hector. Hector didn't speak English well, but he could wash dishes and never complained. He rode his bike to the restaurant every day and worked for both lunch and dinner. I have no idea where he lived. When Tom Collette delivered the alligator and turtle the following Saturday, he brought a young girl with him. Terry was happy to help move the bags of frozen meat out of the truck. Loretta and I noticed that he kept his eyes on the girl, and at one point even stumbled. She looked about Terry's age, maybe a little older. Loretta seemed pleased with the whole scene, and that night at dinner we all started making fun of him about it. The end of February brought several surprises. We had just opened, and I was just preparing the fryers when Loretta returned to the kitchen. Be surprised, John. You have a visitor. Your wife is here. Loretta said it without any expression. I couldn't tell if she was sad, happy, worried, or something else. Taking a deep breath, I went out into the dining room to see Marcy for the first time in months. She was beautiful, as always. Her hair and makeup were impeccable, and the outfit she was wearing accentuated her figure. Loretta stayed in the kitchen. Hi, John. You're not easy to find. You look good. You look good yourself. I didn't expect to see you. Is there any special reason for this visit? I could see that she was nervous. She was biting her lower lip and shifting from one foot to the other. I just wanted to give you a copy of the final divorce decision. It went faster than usual, and I thought you'd want to get it as soon as possible. She handed me a folded document, which I did not open. The house was sold and occupied, so I brought a check for half the amount. It's only $23,000. I didn't know that the realtor's commissions would be so high. She handed me a cash receipt, which I noticed had my name on it. I took the check from her and signed on the back. When I returned the check to her, she looked at me questioningly. I don't need the money, Marcy. Keep them for yourself. This will help you get started. Just curious, what are your plans? I sold everything except my clothes. I'm going to stay with my sister in Dallas. She found a job for me in the same place as she did. The girls promised to come visit me next summer. I hope you will succeed. Do you have any questions, or do you want to discuss anything before I leave? No, not really. I'm fine. I don't need to know, or I don't want to know more than I know right now. In fact, the only thing I can handle is that you're here. Thanks for handing over the papers. I'm sorry, but I have to get back to work now. Everyone who comes to lunch will be here soon. I turned around and walked into the kitchen without looking back. I tried not to be rude, but I didn't want to stay with her any longer than necessary. Many people will say that I was cold, but I don't care. I couldn't do anything to her to atone for what she had done to me. Loretta stood in the kitchen and looked at the river. There was still no expression on her face. I went to the other end of the room and looked at the parking lot. Marcy had just got into her car and was crying in the driver's seat. A minute later, she disappeared, and I'll never see her again. I'm sorry, Loretta. I didn't know she was coming here. I don't even know how she found me. I know it's none of my business, but what did she want? She gave me a copy of the final decision on the divorce. She's free now. What about you? I wasn't so lucky. I've fallen into the trap of the beautiful Cajun queen again. I guess I'm just a sucker for amazing women. I don't see a ring on your finger. How about tomorrow? I finally got an answer. She had a big smile on her face as she wrapped her arms around my neck. After a few minutes of passionate kissing, she pulled away and looked at me. Do you remember our Christmas Eve together? Of course. How can I forget? Well, congratulations. You're going to be a dad soon. The next day we got married and I moved out of the warehouse. The boys were just as happy as I was. Mabel stopped coming to the restaurant for a snack. Loretta would bring light snacks or soup to her trailer after the fuss had subsided. Clyde sat down with Loretta and me and said it was time for her to go to the nursing home. To get into one of them, she had to sell the marina complex. At that time, it wasn't a marina yet, but we didn't know what to call it. Mabel was still as reasonable and sharp as a whip. I didn't say anything to Loretta when Mabel and I started negotiations. It took most of my stashed money, but in the end I bought everything from Mabel, including the trailers. The only concession I had to make was about Clyde. I agreed to let him run the gas station and the boat parks. I would pay him a salary plus free accommodation in his trailer. It was a good deal for me, because the station brought in more than his salary. I installed a dishwasher in the kitchen. This made Hector very happy. We hired a waitress to help Loretta with the housework, hoping that Loretta would be trained by the deadline. The waitress was a single mother with 2 children. She was thrilled when we offered her to rent an empty trailer at a reasonable price. Year after year passed, and the marina blossomed. Things went better than we expected. We have added shrimp dishes that can be cooked on the boat, cleaned, and eaten for female customers. Before the end of the summer, we had a dozen full-time boats on new listings and a waiting list for all the new locations that were opening. Money was not a problem, only time. I was happy and satisfied. Terry had a strong relationship with Tom Collette's daughter, Tracy. Josh used every opportunity he had. As a result, Josh started working with Clyde. He asked his mom if he could take over running the gas station when Clyde retired. We didn't know that Clyde was planning to retire, and we were sure that it would happen in a couple of years. Terry wanted to stay at the restaurant. After spending a few days with their mother, Janet and Rachel arrived and spent the rest of the summer helping with the housework. They stopped in the storeroom. They never mentioned their mother. Loretta got along well with my daughters. It is said that the genes of the father determine the sex of the child. In September, Loretta had a baby girl. We named her Mabel. As our first wedding anniversary approached, Loretta asked me where I would like to go to celebrate. I replied, anywhere but a steakhouse. End.